All right, this is the lowdown on going to upmarket. Sometimes size does matter, honestly. All right. Okay, so what's going to happen in the next 60 minutes? We're going to figure out if you're ready to go upmarket. We're going to talk about how to find these elusive upmarket creatures. We're going to create a sales process that cements your value. We're going to help you be an effective stage manager, which is honestly the hardest part of this whole thing. And then at the end of it, we're going to learn how to seal the deal. So what do we mean by upmarket? In the most direct context, it means that it's people who can pay you more. And that's really what it comes down to, is people who can give you more money. And in exchange for that, they probably demand a lot more from you. But in the very best case, it's someone who looks like somebody you're already working with, except they're a lot bigger and further down the road. However, in worst case, it's undiscovered country, and there's lots of monsters there, and there's all sorts of unknown things, because when you are moving from small to large, or from your current customer to the next level of customer, they have a completely different buying process than your current customers. And so you've really got to decide if you're ready. So you have my permission to go up market if you're really effing good at what you do. If your service only works because it's completely commoditized and process driven, you probably can't go up market, because other people, larger companies who have more options, more resources, more wherewithal, they're going to ask you to adapt to them. They're not going to adapt to you in the same way the small customers will. If you cannot adapt your process to a brand new landscape, and this especially happens when you're using outsourced labor and they can only do what you tell them, that gets really hard, because you've taught this team how to do the thing for this one particular size of customer. But with scale comes complexity, and complexity requires adjustment. You also need really effective client communications, because if you cannot really understand how to communicate your value to a bigger, more sophisticated customer, who frankly probably has a lot more experience and has worked with other marketers before, they're going to call your BS and fire you if you cannot communicate your value. And finally, and this is the hardest part, I think, is you have to understand how bigger clients think and how they act, because it's a different game than when you are working for an owner-operated micro business. And let's call a micro business anything that's, say, under $2 million a year. Anything that could go out of business in a month. Those are micro businesses. All right, so a bigger client, they're more sophisticated. They actually have options. Just because you sent them a cold email and you were talking to them does not mean that you are suddenly at the top of their list. So they can go find more people easily. Also, larger customers are much more focused on outcomes rather than price. And so if you are leading with price, or if you are leading with guarantees, you're not going to be attractive to them, because they are really focused on the outcome. And a bigger client, honestly, unlike smaller clients, their business is going to work with or without you. So you have to get to the point where they want you, because they're never going to need you. And suddenly I feel like I'm going to start singing a Meatloaf song. And if you're a certain age, you'll know that, but I'm guessing, All right. Also, you're not going to land these folks without knowing what's important to them. And frankly, it's not whatever bullshit return on ad spend or amazing results you had with some customer who's not relevant to them. You also have to understand their scale. What moves the needle? Just recently on LinkedIn, I wrote about this very issue when I was working with landing Nike. To that point, my company had only done small deals. And we were like showing like a 3x return on $2,500 of ad spend. And the guy from Nike practically laughed me out of the room because that didn't matter to him. Like, he spent more on his couch in his office than that. And so you have to understand their scale effectively and be able to show that what you can do moves the needle. And this is something that does not exist in small businesses when you are selling to the decision maker, is you've got to understand the political landscape. When anybody chooses to hire you, they are expending their internal political capital on your promise. And so they're going to spend that very conservatively. They're not going to go take a big jump. Now, if you're the CEO, you can do whatever the F you want. But if you're the VP of marketing, if you screw up, it could be that the CMO or the CRO or the CEO is suddenly all pissed at you. So if you're ready, let's figure out how to go get these people. All right, so how do you find them? There's the regular way. You cold email, LinkedIn, calls, all that sort of stuff. And then there's the other regular ways. There's content on LinkedIn or on your blog or anywhere else where you are not talking about these are the amazing results I got from my client, not where you're selling, but rather where you are explaining how you understand the market better or differently or more completely, and your understanding translates directly to what they need. And then there are other ways. Who do you know? Who did you go to college with? Who did your brother go to college with? Who was in the Rotary Club with your Uncle Joe? There's all sorts of other ways. And then you've got to start thinking about your personal network. Who do you know who knows the person you want to know? And you have to be a little bit shameless. Because even if you reach out to your best friend, one of my very best friends in the entire world works really closely with the New York Mets. Now, would I love to go do some marketing analysis for the New York Mets? You betcha. But I don't have a reason. He could introduce me to this person, but I wouldn't have anything to say to them. So you've got to discover what your reason for reaching out is. So if you're going to ask your friend, or you're going to do that cold email, or you're going to network through organizations, there's got to be a real reason why you are reaching out to them. It has to be relevant. It has to be real. Is it an event? Is it an insight about their business? Is it an opportunity that they don't know about? Is it a new way of getting clients? Is it a new technology? And this is usually the one that grabs them, is how can you deliver a competitive advantage to them? And so understanding exactly why you are reaching out and making that relevant to them, because if you just send the regular, "Hi, I hope this email finds you well" kind of bullshit, they don't have time for that. They're only going to invest their attention into something that makes a difference to their business. So if you don't know what's going to make a difference to their business, you can't really reach out yet. And I call that reason. That's the trigger. That reason for reaching out, that's the trigger. So you have to have a clear plan of what happens after the trigger. You're not pitching a meeting. You're not making an offer. All you are trying to do is determine the relevance between what you do and what they need. That's it. So you've really got to understand what you can do to grab their attention. And then you need to be able to determine how relevant it is to them quickly, because you might be able to do something that is like so remarkable, but it's not relevant to them. So as a perfect example, if you if you have a Formula One sponsorship to sell to somebody, and it could be an enormous, amazing branding opportunity, but you're trying to sell it to a moving company in Omaha, Nebraska, they might have the money to be able to do it, but it's not relevant to them. It's an amazing opportunity that's rare and special, and it's not relevant. So you need to understand what is relevant to them to ensure that what you are delivering creates it leads them to the right outcome. And once you have the trigger and you know that it's relevant, you then have to attack them relentlessly from all sides. So many people simply focus on, I'm sending cold emails and that's how I create business. Cool. But that's not going to be enough, because that person at that bigger company that you care about, they get cold emails from everybody. So you've got to go find a shared connection on LinkedIn. You've got to find, maybe you have a connection to somebody else at their company who can provide an introduction. Maybe there's an alum of their college that is maybe relevant to them. Do you know somebody who used to work there or work with them at another company, blah, blah, blah. You've got to go to their webinars. You got to message them, regularly with increasingly relevant info. You got to go to a trade show where you think they might be. You've really got to create your own awareness, because there is no single event. There's no single methodology of contact that will ensure opportunity. And so when you are thinking about working with bigger customers, every opportunity needs its own contact plan. You simply cannot jump in and think, I'm going to send them this amazing email sequence and that's going to work. If you're trying to pitch a really big company, the chances of that person ever seeing it is practically zero. And this is hard. This is really hard because it takes a long time. When I was working at Tenuity, their average sales cycle for a top level customer was something like 10 to 11 months. And so that meant that there was, from the first response to closing a deal, is like 10 and a half months. So these are not things that move quickly. So you absolutely need to have the patience and the understanding that this is something that is going to take a long time and require an extraordinary amount of effort on your part, because there is not a single silver bullet here. Once you have attacked relentlessly from all sides, and really you've got to be dogged about it, because somebody actually might be interested in what you're doing, but it's not relevant to them in the moment, but it might be in a month or 2 months or 5 months. So you've really got to continue to create your own awareness if you think that there's a problem that you can solve for this company. And once they see you, this is not time to pitch them on anything, because chances are that the person who you are speaking to does not make a decision on their own. They are more likely the first line of defense. And so you have got to be able to endear yourself to them functionally by what content do you have? Can you make an introduction to someone? What stories can you tell? What insight do you have into their business? Scott, in your case, if you're going from, essentially right now you're doing like home services stuff, right? Yeah. And let's imagine you were going to step this up to home builders or whatever. Somebody who's much bigger and moves more slowly and is not thinking, how many leads get this month? You've got to really think, what content do I have on LinkedIn, on my website, on my YouTube channel, on my Twitter, whatever, that is relevant to this particular opportunity? Is there something that I've created in the past that shows this person that I understand them? And then are there introductions that you can make to other people that you know? And a great thing to do is just ask them. I know that we're talking, but are there other things that you're looking for? because what you were trying to do is cement the value of the relationship with you. So you are investing into the opportunity for them to open up to you. Are there stories that you can tell about things you've done in the past or that you've seen other people do in the past that is relevant? Is there insight that you can give them into their market or to their competitors? One of the very best things that I've seen, this is a client, Paris Childress, and he works with SaaS companies. He did a marketing teardown of the number one company in the space. And so he invested a lot of time into this. And then he reached out to the CEOs of about a dozen competitors to this large company and said, hey, I have ripped apart their marketing to show you where you should not be attacking them and where they are soft. Do you want to go through it and talk about it? And that worked enormously well. And so he actually had multiple meetings and at least 2 clients from that effort. Now, it did take him probably 12 to 15 hours worth of speculative work to do this teardown. And I think if you were to do it again, he might actually get people to buy in first, then do the work. He actually created this deep insight that potentially exposed opportunities and weaknesses, that could be attacked, and unassailable strengths of the market leader, so that it was deep insight into the market, into the business, and really helped the competitors understand how they could compete better. And that was just enormous. And so what you really need to own at this point is that you have got to think of this entire process as sales as a service. Because as we said before, like, a larger company doesn't need you. There's a bunch of other people that they could choose. Like, they have money, they can spend it. Like, if you're charging whatever, $8,000 for whatever you're doing, there's a lot of people do a lot of stuff for $8,000. They might go spend $10,000 with someone else. If that's not the issue, you have got to prove to them that you own a spot in their ecosystem that makes sense. And that leads us to this idea of a sales process. So many smaller agencies are just desperate to get to the offer. That's not going to work here. As a matter of fact, that will kill you. If you make an offer too quickly, you will end up just being bounced out because your offer will not be relevant. Now, there's as many steps to the sales process as there needs to be. So it's not like there's an intro call, there's not like a discovery call, an audit review, and then a pitch. There could be 100 meetings here before it's time to make an offer. It really is just about introducing yourself, making them aware that you exist, and then know your customer. Like, it takes larger companies are opaque. There might be 5 directors of marketing that all handle some ridiculous small piece of something. But you've got to understand that. And you've got to understand their process and their roles. And the very best way to do it is just to ask, hey, awesome. If we want to explore this relationship and potentially grow it into something bigger, who needs to be involved? What's the steps? How urgent is the thing that we're talking about? Is it on fire, or is this something you're thinking about for the 3rd quarter of 2029? Asking those questions helps you understand what the sales process needs to be. The 2 most important things is making them aware of you and then knowing what their process is, because you can shape your value through this idea of sales as a service, that is being of service to someone. So you can help them. And at some point, it's going to get to the place where they are comfortable enough with you and they have enough trust in your expertise and your insight that they will invite you to come discover what their problems are. If you start poking right away, they're just going to smell a shark. They're just going to feel attacked. So you need to really start thinking about knowing what they need. How do I serve them so that they will invite me to discover? And then the outcome might be a small offer or a bigger offer or a huge offer. But you have to be prepared in thinking about that. This is where it comes to the point where if your program, if your offer, if your service is so completely commoditized that it cannot be adapted, where it's one size fits all, you can't work with bigger clients because they might say, oh my God, you are freaking awesome and I love you, but I only have $2,500 in this year's budget. Because larger companies, they get a budget. They know what the budget is. If they need to go exchange the budget or go get more money, they've got to expend some of that political capital. And that's really expensive for them. It is much more likely they'll say something like, I only have $2,500 for this quarter or maybe for next quarter. Is there something smaller we can do? And then you can work your way up. But you need to think about every stage of the sales process as a pasture with a locked gate, like one of those like role player games we used to play when you're on the computer. Like you had to ask the right questions so they tell you where the key is. You have to gather the right information. So wherever you are, you need to think, okay, what's the information I need to gather now so that we can deepen the conversation in the future? And simply list it out. I want to know, if I don't know, what's their revenue? Who's in the department that I'm trying to engage with? How do they assign budgets? What's their sales goal? Are they ahead of it? Are they behind it? What's happening? So you need to have all of this information, because when you get all of the information, because you've asked the right question, you are building trust, and the prospect will let you know the gate's open, come on in. So believe it or not, the sales process isn't really a process of selling. It's really the buyer letting you come into their buying process. So what are the things that they need to know that you understand? What do you understand that will help them believe that you can do this? Now, this is where it gets actually so much more complicated than when you are working with a single decision maker. In a larger company, there's almost always multiple decision makers, and you need to manage the entire process and create unique value for each of them. This is an org chart. You might be like the VP of X might be the person who's the owner of the deal, but there's also a manager in there, there's an end user, there's a director of some other department that actually might be impacted by this. So you have got to create value for all of these roles, because these three roles will influence the decision of the vice president. You won't know who these roles are unless you ask, unless you do that discovery so that you can understand who is part of this decision, who are the people that we need to please. And then ultimately, depending upon the size of the deal, it actually might be a CEO or a board decision. And you will probably never get to meet them. So you need to ask these people, the senior decision makers, what's the information that you need in order to effectively present this as a value to whomever you have to get approval from. And that is so much more complicated because you have to give your trust, you have to give your opportunity to somebody else to close. So you really have to know who's your economic buyer, who's the person with the purse strings, who's the champion of your offer, who's the primary person you're going to interface with if you get to go ahead, and who else in the company is impacted by your engagement. Hey, Razib, in some respects, you might be selling SEO services, which you do. And you might know that it's the VP of marketing who's the champion of your offer. It's the procurement department who's the economic buyer. And it's the marketing manager who's the primary interface for the engagement. But it might be the tech team who's impacted by your engagement. So you actually need to create value for them as well. So you need to be able to effectively understand who's part of the process. And how do you get all this information? It's really amazingly simple. You just ask. You ask really probing questions like, what's your decision-making process? Who's involved? What are the roles? What constitutes success? What are the friction points? Just really ask, because if you don't ask, you're not going to know. And if you don't know, you're going to essentially, you're going to head the wrong way, because it will have to work on your assumptions. And fundamentally, you can't work on any assumption that you have. You have to get that information clarified and defined by the person you're speaking to, because you can't see their internal process from the outside. And once you have all this information, you really need to de-risk every touch point. Every time you talk to the end user of your product or the marketing manager, what's their concern? What's hard for them? What are the things that I need to understand about what they do so that they feel confident that I am going to deliver everything that they need all the time? Because that person, that end user, that point of contact could be the person who says, you know what, like, we've tried this before, and the way that this company is approaching is totally different. I'm very excited about that. That might be the thing that tells the vice president, who is your champion, or who's your decision maker or champion. That might be the thing that says, you know what, great, we're going to get rid of all the other competitors who approach things the other way. You need to understand everybody's world. You need to understand what constitutes success for them, and you have to be able to de-risk the engagement at every touch point. And by de-risk, I don't mean offering guarantees. You understand the things that could go wrong. You understand the things that might actually or feel like you are making more work for somebody. You understand where you are asking somebody to currently adjust their workflow, which sucks because nobody wants to adjust their workflow. So you have to be aware of all of these things and then be able to say, oh, got it. If you going into our platform to look at reporting doesn't work, great, cool. What else can we do? How do we de-risk that? How do we take away that objection? Is there something, can we email a report to you rather than having you log into the platform or whatever? Like, those are the things that you need to be really thinking about and addressing during the sales process, because it is those small things that will drive the decision to say yes. Now, once we get to the idea of a proposal, much like a good marriage proposal, a business proposal should never come as a surprise. Actually, it should never be surprising that you were proposing. right? So it can be a surprise. Ha, I did it on Tuesday. You were expecting it on Thursday. But they should never be shocked that you are proposing, and they should never be shocked about what's in your proposal. Because if you were doing a good job here at understanding who the players are, what their needs are, and way back here, you've done discovery and you have agreed on things that define success. When we get to here, everything makes sense. So you need to know that your benefit matches their needs. You need to know what the friction points are so that you can show that you are erasing them. Any objections, you should have at least addressed them so that you've de-risked them to some extent. And then you really have to be ready for, we're not ready to be married, but you can start leaving your toothbrush here. So you need to be able to get ready to prove yourself in an engagement. And when this happens, when someone says, hey, is there something smaller we can do? Absolutely. You should have that prepared. You should have a smaller version of your engagement in your back pocket so that you can pull it out without having to go through the process again. It can be reduced in scope, it can be reduced in time, whatever, but you should have a step down offer somewhere in your arsenal. Now, what are the key elements to a winning proposal? You understand what defines success, right? And success is never just revenue or traffic or return on ad spend or leads. Like those are the tools. Success comes in business growth, increased revenue, decreased costs, new markets, reactivating old markets, better analysis. Like it comes from all sorts of things, and you need to know what those things are before you pitch, because if you are pitching that we're going to drive return on ad spend like crazy, and what they are really interested in is understanding their clients better. They want more data about their existing buyers who they don't care about your return on ad spend, because what they want is to be able to extract more money from their existing clients. So you need to make sure that you are fully, completely, and carefully aligned with what defines success for them. And again, what you have to do in order to get that definition is ask them. Once, and in your proposal, you have to clearly, confidently, and concisely articulate how your thinking, your team, your process, your tech, your insight, your experience, whatever, addresses the issues that you are having, that they are having, and it becomes so clear because you are so aligned that achieving the result is almost inevitable. And many agencies use what I call a process sale. They say things like, we go through this specific process, that way we don't make mistakes, we capture everything, and it all works. Cool, that's fine, that's a decent benefit. But what you need to be able to do is say, hey, we go through these 8 steps, and I'm going to tell you how each one of these 8 steps gets you closer to that goal, to that definition of success, and how when you do all these 8 steps, it's almost unimaginable that it doesn't work. And the way that you can do that is not by saying, we did it for these people and they got whatever, $1 bazillion more dollars or whatever. What you need to do is be able to say, this is what we do, this is how it connects to what you want, and this is how we don't screw it up. And throughout the process, since you are actively de-risking everything before you get to the sales perspective, this becomes pretty easy because you have got a lot of information about what matters to them. And if you are ever unclear about what matters to them, you have to go and address that with the person you've been talking to. And you need to present it in such a way as, hey, this is what I was thinking. I was thinking that if we put together an approach that where we like maximize your return on ad spend, blah, blah, whatever it is, and just say, does that make sense? Is that an answer to the problems that we've talked about? And they're going to tell you yes or no. And like push them, be a little aggressive about this thing, because when I put this down on paper in a proposal, I want you to think, yeah, we talked about that and they nailed it. Because, this is part of selling with an idea of service. You want to give them what they are expecting so it becomes easier for them to say yes, because surprises create friction, and friction leads people to other vendors. The longer the conversation and the more questions you ask, you don't have to ask them all at once, because we're not in a rush to get through this, because you already know what their buying process is, because very early in the process you asked. You can effectively show them that you understand what success is and that your process, team, experience, technology, dance moves, whatever, make it inevitable. Now, almost everybody fails on number one, meaning understanding exactly what defines success for the prospect. People don't articulate that because they want to show off. They want to show how good they are. And they think that the proposal or the offer stage is showing like how magical we are and how we're so cool. We did these things, and therefore we can do it for you too. You haven't earned that because you haven't done it for them. So proposals are never about you. They are only about defining success and showing how you can help your prospect achieve it. There's nothing else. This is sales right here, all of it. Understanding what defines success and showing how you can accomplish it. That's it. There's no magic closing words. There's no super duper tricky email that gets people to say yes. There's no magic PowerPoint formula, whatever. There's no guarantee. The entire sales process is this: understanding what defines success and being able to articulate it, how you can effectively achieve that with your client. Okay, so where are we? Yeah, we already know that you're ready. We identified targets and we have a trigger, like there's a reason why we're reaching out to them. We attack on all sides, directly, indirectly, network, meeting them at events, commenting on their LinkedIn, showing up to their webinars, whatever, making yourself visible. And then we jump into the idea of sales as being of service. How can we help? How can I share? Who can I introduce you to? How can I make myself valuable to you so that I build enough credibility with you that you will be vulnerable and tell me what business problems that you are trying to solve? And then we ask the prospect, okay, what's your buying process? How do you make decisions? Who's involved? And that way you can map out what the sales process is likely to look like. And you can define what information you need to gather at each stage of the sales process so that the prospect will unlock the gate and let you into the next phase. You've also got to identify who are the players. You need to give them really great stage direction and give them good lines. You've got to create value so that they are excited about working with you. You have already talked about everything that's in the proposal before you put a proposal together. There's nothing that's a surprise, including the price. If the price, like, you need to be talking about the price throughout the process, saying, okay, we're at the stage where it makes sense to think about an engagement. Cool. So what's the value of this problem being solved for you? Are we talking about a $500 opportunity or a $5 million opportunity? And that will help you articulate the price, and you can show why, if it's a $5 million opportunity, giving me $750,000 is still in your benefit, right? And then we also understand that it might be too early because we are too small, or we don't have a long enough track record for them to want to get married. So we need to understand that we have a backup plan. We've got something that we can show to them that will allow them to let us stay over a couple of times. Now, at this point, once you have delivered the proposal, like, it's time to negotiate. So you should, Chris Voss's book is called Never Split the Difference, and I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in the email to you guys later today. But functionally, read that book, it's great. But when there are big company and small company dynamics, don't collapse on the price, because that happens all the time. People think, you know what, I will de-risk it by making it cheaper. You can't ever do that, because if you do that, you've just said that I'm a submissive puppy. All right, good. And your roof still works. I didn't screw you.
Oh, yeah.
Good, okay.
Yeah, no, worked out well.
So you can't collapse on price. Like, that sends all the wrong signals. You need to focus on the value that you bring and the benefits that we've received, because we've already asked about that. We've already talked about that. That's a known thing. You should also have a clear line that you will not go below. If you say this is $5,000 a month, and you know what, my budget is only $2,750. Will you do it for that? And you've decided I lose money starting at $3,750, to say no. You can't go, you cannot. Nothing is so secure that you can afford to lose money on the hope that you'll get more business. If you cannot be profitable in your first engagement, you can't do it. And also, to combat the price pressure, use the things that you've already agreed on. Like, you said that you think if we could solve this, it's worth whatever, $200,000 in profit. Or you've agreed this thing that we're talking about is a big bottleneck in your business growth. And so use those things to remind them that they have expressed a need that you can fix. You can offer terms to further de-risk, meaning instead of billing in advance, you might bill 15 days in arrears, or you might break it up into phases with triggered payments or something where they feel like they're in more control. But you don't have to drop your price. You can just offer terms that are acceptable to both. And if you were feeling like you're being disrespected by this bigger company and they're just squeezing you, just say it. Just come out and say it, because a good partner will address it, and they will work with you to find a way so that you feel respected. A bad partner will double down and try to crush you. And you have my permission to tell them to go fuck off and leave at that point. All right, that's it. Questions, thoughts, ideas?
I guess how would you define big versus small? Like, how do you draw the line? Or is there such a thing?
No, there isn't a line.
Sorry, I joined late. My apologies.
That's all right. That's fine. In this context, it's upmarket means somebody that can pay you more and likely demands more of you. Somebody who's at a higher level of sophistication than the people you currently work with. Somebody who has a more successful business than the average business you currently work with. And it's super, super important that you understand that those bigger businesses, they have options. And what it really comes down to is you have to make them want to work with you because they don't need you. They have to want to work with you because you understand them and can offer them something that other people cannot. And that thing that you can offer them is not a cheaper price. That might be part of the equation why they're interested, but that is not the reason why they are going to jump in at all. What they are really going to focus on is the benefit that they get from working with you, because they understand how much you understand about them. They understand that you've got insight or opportunity or a competitive advantage for them that will be beneficial to their business. And that's a huge thing to understand. All right. So clearly I've answered all of your questions. Everything's fine. So here's what I'll do is I'll post this training up somewhere, and I'll send you guys an email with some links about some other stuff that is relevant. And thanks for showing up. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Tim, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. Yeah.
So totally happy to do it. I love doing this stuff. All right. Have a great Wednesday, guys.
Later.
Go Celtics. See ya. Bye-bye.